Have you ever thought about the consequences of the smallest decisions that we make? I mean, tiny, minuscule. A word that you didn't say, a call that you didn't return, a single thought that you entertained and just let it hang around. There's a place where a drop of water lands, and depending on which side of the river it falls, it ends up in a different ocean months later, east or west. Today, we're talking about that one drop, and it has to do with the quiet decisions that shape our lives. The parting of the waters is where the world divides, not with fanfare, not with warning, but with a trickle. It's located in the remotest of areas, deep within Wyoming's Teton wilderness. If not for a rugged sign marking the site, you'd pass right by it, unaware of its significance. It is here that a stream called Two Ocean Creek splits in two. One side becomes Atlantic Creek, heading east. The other side becomes Pacific Creek, flowing west. And that's it. A drop of water, depending on which side of the divide it falls, ends up in a completely different ocean. East to the Atlantic, west to the Pacific. Thousands of miles apart, and it begins with a fraction of an inch at the start. This is not a vague metaphor. It's as real as can be, but it illustrates a powerful lesson for all of us. We're all walking around with our own invisible divides, aren't we? Every thought we allow, every word we choose, every small decision we make. It's trivial in the moment, but they flow somewhere. We tell ourselves real change is made by bold declarations. Be the change you want to see in the world. Big pivots, grand gestures. But that's not how rivers are born. Rivers start with a trickle, and they go where the land takes them. And we lean, just like that river, one way or the other. A man intends to return a phone call from a high school friend, but he lets the busyness of life distract him. Years later, he sees a notice in the obituaries, and all he can do is regret not taking the time to make that phone call. A woman sits in a board meeting. She has the idea. She has the words that will make the difference, that will make the project a success. But something in her says, don't be a burden. Don't take up space. The company moves forward without her input. The project is a mild success, but certainly not what it could have been. Someone else gets the promotion. She didn't fail, but she didn't succeed either. She allowed fear to block her flow. Most of the big things in our lives aren't the result of a single cataclysm. They're the accumulated momentum of tiny decisions we didn't think mattered at the time. We drift. We default. We say, it's just a thought, just a tone of voice, just a look, just one more moment scrolling, just this once. But once you're on the wrong side of the creek, it's hard to get out. Better to get those tiny thoughts and actions on the right side of the creek from the outset. There was a woman who never answered a question. It was asked in passing, half joke, half jab, by the man she married. She laughed it off outwardly, but inside she went quiet. She never told him that it hurt. She told herself it wasn't worth the argument, that it would pass. But it didn't pass. It settled. It hardened. It shaped the way she heard everything that came from him after that day. 10 years later, they sat at opposite ends of a counseling room, speaking politely like strangers. How did we get here? She asked herself. Our ego loves to pat itself on the back, say everything is under control. Sure, I made a small error, we tell ourselves, but I can turn it around if it gets bad enough. But that's the trap. Water doesn't decide which way it goes once it's in motion. It just follows the grade. And contrary to what we might tell ourselves, it's very difficult to change our actions, our thought patterns, and our habits once they're in motion. That's why those early inches matter the most, and why it's so critical to make sound decisions before the proverbial parting of the waters. Not because they're dramatic, but precisely because they're quiet. A man declines a job offer. It wasn't the right time. It would have stretched him too far. He told himself he'd wait for a better one. The better one never came. 10 years later, he doesn't talk about it, but every now and then, when the house is quiet, he thinks about that email that went unanswered and wonders what could have been. You don't need to live in paranoia, second-guessing every word. This is not about guilt. It's about gravity. There's a pull in us toward clarity or confusion, toward bitterness or forgiveness, toward courage or comfort. And every little thought, every little act, leans us one way or the other. You don't notice it at first, but the drop becomes a stream. The stream becomes a river. And eventually, you're miles down the direction that you don't necessarily want to be, wondering how you got so far from where you started. But I don't say all of this to be pessimistic. There is good news. If you're listening to this and thinking, I've drifted in a course that I don't necessarily want to be, you can change course. Unlike that drop of water that doesn't have any choice, doesn't have any say in the matter, and ends up in one ocean or the other, you can change the course of your life. Not with force, not with frenzy, and definitely not overnight. With just one tiny lean in the other direction. A new thought. A choice made in humility rather than ego. A quiet correction of the course. That's all it takes. The difference between east and west, between clarity and confusion, peace and regret, usually starts with something that felt too small to notice. The slope is subtle. The water doesn't argue. It just flows. The divide stands before us each time we open our eyes. So today, whatever moment you're standing in, notice which way you're leaning. Because sooner or later, that direction becomes your destination.